Mameluk is a term most commonly referring to non-Arab, ethnically diverse, mostly Turkic, Caucasian, Eastern and Southeastern European slave soldiers. Originally, the Mamelukes were slaves of Turkic origin from the Eurasian steppe, but the institution of military slavery spread to include Circassians, Abkhazians, Georgians, Armenians, Russians, and Hungarians. They also recruited from the Egyptians. Until the 1990s, it was widely believed that the earliest Mamelukes were known as Gilman or Ghulam, another broadly synonymous term for slaves. The Mameluke system developed later, after the return of the Caliphate to Baghdad in the 870s. It included the systematic training of young slaves in military and martial skills. Under the Mameluke Sultanate of Cairo, Mamelukes were purchased while still young males. They were raised in the barracks of the citadel of Cairo. Because of their isolated social status, no social ties or political affiliations, they were trusted to be loyal to their rulers. In Egypt, studies have shown that Mamelukes from Georgia retained their native language and were aware of the politics of the Caucasus region. In addition, they sent gifts to family members or gave money to build useful structures, a defensive tower, or even a church in their native villages. From the 900s through the 1400s, Egypt was controlled by dynastic rulers, notably the Ikhshidids, Fatimids, and Ayyubids. Throughout these dynasties, thousands of Mameluke servants and guards continued to be used and even took high offices. This increasing level of influence among the Mamelukes worried the Ayyubids in particular. Eventually, a Mameluke rose to become sultan. According to Fabri, a historian had asserted that Mamelukes of Egyptian origin were enslaved Christians. In June 1249, the Seventh Crusade under Louis Roman IX of France landed in Egypt and took Damietta. When the Egyptian Sultan Salih Ayyub died, the power passed briefly to his son Al-Mu'izz Ancharanch and then his favourite wife Shajar al-Dair. She took control with Mameluke support and launched a counterattack against the French. When the Mongol Empire's troops of Hulagu Khan sacked Baghdad in 1258 and advanced towards Syria, the Mameluke Emir Baybars left Damascus for Cairo. There he was welcomed by Sultan Qutuz. After taking Damascus, Hulagu demanded that Qutuz surrender Egypt. Qutuz had Hulagu's envoys killed and, with Baybars' help, mobilized his troops. The Mamelukes defeated the Ilkhanates a second time in the First Battle of Homs and began to drive them back east. By the late 14th century, the majority of the Mameluke ranks were made up of Circassians from the North Caucasus region. In 1382, the BURJI dynasty took over when Barquq was proclaimed sultan. The name BURJI referred to their centre at the citadel of Cairo. Mameluke Sultan al-Ashar of Khans al-Ghori was affronted at the attacks around the Red Sea. He vowed vengeance upon Portugal, first sending monks from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as envoys. The rulers of Gujarat in India and Yemen also turned for help to the Mameluke Sultan of Egypt. Mameluke Egyptian Sultan al-Ghori was charged by Sulayman with giving the Persian envoys passage through Syria on their way to Venice. In 1515, Sulayman began the war which led to the conquest of Egypt and its dependencies. Syria passed into Turkish possession, an event welcomed in many places as it was seen as deliverance from the Mamelukes. Although not in the same form as under the Sultanate, the Ottoman Empire retained the Mamelukes as an Egyptian ruling class. In 1798, the ruling Directory of the Republic of France authorized a campaign in the Orient to protect French trade interests and undermine Britain's access to India. Napoleon Bonaparte led an army d'Orient to Egypt. The French defeated a Mameluke army in the Battle of the Pyramids. After the departure of French troops in 1801, the Mamelukes continued their struggle for independence, this time against the Ottoman Empire and Great Britain. In 1803, Mameluke leaders Ibrahim Bey and Osman Bey al-Bardasi wrote to the Russian consul general, asking him to mediate with the Sultan to allow them to negotiate for a ceasefire and a return to their homeland Georgia. Muhammad Ali knew that he would have to deal with the Mamelukes if he wanted to control Egypt. They were still the feudal owners of Egypt and their land was still the source of wealth and power. However, the economic strain of sustaining the military manpower would eventually weaken them to the point of collapse. Muhammad Ali's forces killed almost all of these near the Al-Azab gates in a narrow road down from Yucatan Hill. The reliance on Mamelukes by Muslim rulers had a profound impact on the Arab world's political development. European rulers had to rely on local elites for military forces. Muslim rulers did not face the same pressures, partly because the Mamelukes allowed the sultans to bypass local elites. There were various places in which Mamelukes gained political or military power as a self-replicating military community. Some examples of this can be seen in the Tripolitania region of Libya, where Mameluke governors instated their policies under the Ottoman Empire. Mameluke corps were first introduced in Iraq by Hassan Pasha of Baghdad in 1702. From 1747 to 1831, Iraq was ruled, with short intermissions, by Mameluke officers of Georgian origin. In 1831, the Ottomans overthrew Dawood Pasha and imposed direct control over Iraq.